The land between the two, referring to the modern-day Israel and Palestine region, has a long history of occupation by various civilizations. The area has been home to ancient peoples, and the historical record is complex. The Canaanites were among the earliest known inhabitants of the region. They established city-states and thrived in the area for centuries. The Israelites, led by figures like Abraham and Moses, are said to have settled in the region around 1200 BCE. The biblical narrative describes the establishment of the Kingdom of Israel and later the Kingdom of Judah. In the 8th and 6th centuries BCE, the Assyrians and Babylonians conquered the land, leading to the exile of the Israelites. The Persian Empire, followed by the conquests of Alexander the Great, influenced the region in the 4th century BCE. The Roman Empire took control of the area in the 1st century BCE and played a crucial role in the life of Jesus Christ. The city of Jerusalem became a focal point during this period. After the Roman Empire's division, the Byzantine Empire controlled the region until the 7th century. In the 7th century, Arab Muslim forces led by the Rashidun caliphs conquered the area, introducing Islam. During the medieval period, the Crusaders briefly established Christian kingdoms in the region. The Mamluks and later the Ottoman Empire ruled the area from the medieval period until the end of World War I. The territorial dispute between Israel and Palestine is deeply rooted in historical claims and has been a persistent source of tension for decades. Over the years, we've seen some pretty distressing news about the situation between Israel and Palestine on our screens. So, how did things escalate to the current point where nations are practically at each other's throats? What's the backstory that brought us to this intense situation? Both Israelis and Palestinians assert historical and cultural connections to the same piece of land, specifically in the region known as the West Bank and East Jerusalem. This area holds immense significance for both parties due to its historical and religious importance. Jerusalem, in particular, is a city of great religious significance for Jews, Christians, and Muslims alike. The Old City, with sites like the Western Wall, the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, and the Al-Aqsa Mosque, is at the heart of these claims. And here's where things started going south. On May 14, 1948, David Ben-Gurion, the de facto leader of the Jewish community in Palestine, declared the State of Israel, with President Harry Truman promptly recognizing it. The U.S. had initially supported the idea of a Jewish homeland in Palestine through the Balfour Declaration in 1917. However, President Franklin Roosevelt had promised the Arab nations in 1945 that the U.S. wouldn't act without consulting both parties in the region. The British, who governed Palestine until May 1948, were against creating a Jewish state, an Arab state, or allowing unrestricted Jewish immigration. They wanted to maintain good relations with the Arabs to protect their interests in the region. President Truman, upon taking office, formed a committee to assess the situation. In May 1946, he approved admitting 100,000 displaced persons to Palestine, and later, he publicly supported the creation of a Jewish state. In 1947, the United Nations recommended the partition of Palestine into Jewish and Arab states. The U.S. supported this, but the State Department proposed a UN trusteeship with limited Jewish immigration and division of Palestine into provinces, not states as proposed by the U.S. They were concerned about Soviet influence in the Arab world and potential restrictions on oil supplies. As the British prepared to leave Palestine, the U.S. feared a full-scale war as Arab nations threatened to attack following the UN's partition resolution. Even with the escalating conflict between Palestinian Arabs and Palestinian Jews, and even though the Department of State was leaning towards endorsing a trusteeship, Truman eventually made the call to recognize the State of Israel. The territorial dispute revolves around competing national aspirations and the desire for self-determination. The establishment of the State of Israel in 1948 led to the displacement of hundreds of thousands of Palestinians, creating a refugee crisis. The subsequent wars and conflicts further shaped the territorial boundaries and left Israel in control of significant portions of land, including the West Bank. The West Bank is a critical area of contention, with both Israelis and Palestinians claiming it as an integral part of their envisioned state. The construction of Israeli settlements in the West Bank has been a particularly contentious issue. The settlements are seen by the international community, including the United Nations, as a violation of international law and a major obstacle to peace. But the story doesn't end there. The establishment of the State of Israel resulted in the displacement of Palestinians from their ancestral lands. Palestinians demand the right of return for those who fled or were expelled from their homes. This right, seen as essential to rectifying historical injustices, is deeply entrenched in the Palestinian narrative. And Israel has its fears too. Israel has expressed concerns about the demographic impact of a large-scale return of refugees, indicating that it could alter the Jewish majority within its borders. This disagreement over the right of return has impeded peace negotiations for a long time. The territorial dispute, settlements, and the right of return have been persistent obstacles in the peace process. Various peace initiatives, including the Oslo Accords and the Camp David Summit, have attempted to address these issues, but reaching a mutually acceptable resolution has proven elusive. So, what were the objectives and aspirations behind these two initiatives, you might wonder? The Oslo Accords were a series of agreements negotiated between Israel and the Palestine Liberation Organization, PLO, in the 1990s, facilitated by the United States. The primary architects of the accords were Israeli Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin and PLO Chairman Yasser Arafat, with U.S. President Bill Clinton playing a major role. The Oslo Accords had some crucial components, such as setting up a Palestinian interim self-government in portions of the West Bank and Gaza Strip. They also involved a gradual pullout of Israeli forces from parts of the West Bank and Gaza, leading to the creation of the Palestinian Authority to oversee those regions. However, these negotiations did not touch the very sensitive issue of the status of Jerusalem and the issue of Palestinian refugees. Putting the Oslo Accords into action faced its fair share of challenges. Yet, despite the hurdles, it marked the first glimmer of hope for direct talks between Israelis and Palestinians. The second initiative, the Camp David Summit, came around in the year 2000 and was a high-stakes summit convened by U.S. President Bill Clinton aimed to negotiate the contentious issue deferred from the Oslo Accord. The negotiations aimed to resolve the status of Jerusalem, suggesting a plan to divide the city into two. However, the talks hit a roadblock because both parties insisted on asserting their claims to the entire city. Then there was the issue of the right of return for Palestinian refugees, which proved to be another significant hurdle. Israel was reluctant to accept a large-scale return of refugees, while Palestinians insisted on addressing the historical grievances of displaced populations. Despite intensive negotiations and a 15-day summit, the talks collapsed without a final agreement. The failure of the Camp David Summit contributed to heightened tensions and, eventually, the outbreak of the Second Intifada, a period of intensified Israeli-Palestinian violence that began in 2000. In recent years, the Abraham Accords, brokered by the United States, normalized relations between Israel and several Arab countries, a development viewed as a step toward regional stability. Yet, looking at the current state of affairs in the region, it seems all these efforts haven't led to any real ceasefire. As we all know, Hamas orchestrated attacks on Israel, underscoring the ongoing volatility in the region and deepening the complex web of conflicts in the Israeli-Palestinian struggle. So, who exactly is Hamas and what are its intentions? Hamas, an acronym for Harakat al-Muqawama al-Islamiyya, Islamic Resistance Movement, was founded in 1987 during the First Intifada, a period of Palestinian uprising against Israeli rule. Emerging as an offshoot of the Muslim Brotherhood, Hamas was initially established as a social and political organization. However, over time it evolved into a multifaceted entity with both political and military wings. Hamas gained popularity among Palestinians, particularly in the Gaza Strip and the West Bank, due to its stance against Israeli occupation. The organization framed itself as a resistance movement dedicated to defending Palestinian rights and opposing what it viewed as the illegitimate Israeli presence in Palestinian territories. While known for its military activities, Hamas has also been involved in various political and social initiatives. For instance, Hamas has provided social services, including schools, hospitals, and charities, contributing to its grassroots support. This dual role as both a provider of social services and a military force has contributed to its complex and multifaceted nature. In 2006, Hamas participated in Palestinian legislative elections and won a significant number of seats, leading to its subsequent control of the Gaza Strip. This electoral victory, however, resulted in a deep political divide between Hamas and Fatah, the political party dominating the Palestinian Authority. The division led to internal conflicts, culminating in a brief but intense civil war in 2007, during which Hamas took full control of the Gaza Strip. Since then, the Gaza Strip has been governed by Hamas, while the West Bank remains under the authority of the Palestinian Authority led by Fatah and President Mahmoud Abbas. But internationally, Hamas is designated as a terrorist organization by several countries, including the United States, the European Union, and others. This designation is primarily due to the organization's use of violence, including suicide bombings and rocket attacks, targeting civilians, as well as its refusal to recognize the State of Israel. And how does Hamas contribute to the efforts of bringing a truce to Israel-Palestine conflict? Hamas's role in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict poses significant challenges to the peace process. Its refusal to recognize Israel and renounce violence has been a major obstacle in negotiations. However, there have been instances where Hamas has indicated a willingness to consider long-term ceasefires and a two-state solution under certain conditions. Most people in these two countries generally aim for peace, and a long-lasting one at that. However, we can't overlook the hurdles in reaching that goal. These include long-standing historical grievances, the status of Jerusalem, the rights of Palestinian refugees, settlements in the West Bank, extremist violence, the absence of mutual recognition between Israel and Palestinian factions, as well as geopolitical influences affecting the peace process. It's a complex situation with many moving parts, but addressing these issues is crucial for any meaningful progress toward lasting peace. As we witnessed just a few minutes ago, the USA is deeply involved in this conflict. However, it's crucial to acknowledge the deep-seated mistrust from the Palestinian perspective, given the perception of the US as a staunch ally of Israel. The United States has actually extended substantial financial and military assistance to Israel over the years, which has bolstered its military capabilities.
I also antagonized a lot of people by recognizing the State of Israel as soon as it was formed. Well, I had been to Potsdam, and I'd seen some of the places where the Jews had been slaughtered by the Nazis. 6 million Jews were killed outright, men, women, and children, by the Nazis. And it was my hope that they would have a homeland where they could operate. So when the time came for that, we set up the Israeli government in Palestine, moved some of the Arabs out, and they were not moved out and thrown out. They were compensated for the land that they had to give up. The Jews organized a government over there, and it's been a successful one ever since. They've done things over there that never have been done in that part of the world before. And now, while it's a small republic, it's an energetic one. Not long ago, they had a fuss with Egypt. And if they hadn't been interfered with by the then President of the United States, Nasser would have been down in the Sudan where he belongs. That won't help diplomatic relations.